Hey everyone, I'm Shannon Kennedy, the resident polyglot at Drops, and I am here to answer your language learning questions. So let's jump right in. Is it a good time to learn a language while still in school? Of course, any time is a good time to learn a new language. If you wait for the right time, it will never come. Whatever is keeping you busy now will only be replaced by something else later. So instead, if you find a way to make language learning a part of your routine with whatever you have going on now, you're likely to establish a habit that you'll be able to maintain whatever gets thrown at you. That said, with school in particular, it's important to make sure your school studies don't suffer because of your language learning. Dedicate your time and focus to your schoolwork first, then turn to your languages. Don't sacrifice school time. Instead, look to some of the other things that you do, watch TV, play video games, etc., and use some of that time. What were the easiest languages to learn for you? This is a great question because my answer might not be what you expect. We typically think of languages like Russian, Korean, or Japanese as hard, but languages like Indonesian, Spanish, or French as easy. For me, the easiest languages were the ones that I, one, had a ton of motivation to learn, two, had a lot of opportunities to practice, and three, had the most rewarding moments as I learned. And so for me, these were languages like Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, and Japanese. Do you have any advice for people learning a language with a different alphabet from English? I do. I've learned several languages with different writing systems at this point, and my approach to learning them depends on my goal learning the language. If it's a simple writing system, as in an alphabet, I recommend learning it right away because it'll help you with a ton of things. You'll have access to more resources, and you'll have a better time with pronunciation. To learn it, I recommend trying scripts. I also recommend writing the letters out by hand and write out the words using the letters or characters that you know. I also recommend practicing reading individual words at first and then short sentences and then more advanced reading. It'll be slow at first, but the more you do it, the more comfortable it will get. What is the first step to take to become a polyglot? The first step to take to become a polyglot is to learn your first second language. It teaches you both how to learn a language and it gets your first language under your belt. Once you get it to a secure level around B2 on the CEFR scale, you add your second. So spend more time maintaining both, then add your third, and so on. It's all about adding one, making it strong, then adding the next. You can, of course, do it different ways. I know other polyglots have used different methods, but this is what's worked for me. How do you start making useful phrases in your new language? There are many ways you can start making useful phrases in a new language, but this is what I do. Grab a piece of paper, pick a topic you'd like to talk about. For example, let's say your self-introduction. Write down all the things you can imagine wanting to say as a bullet point list in your native language. So mine might be, I'm Shannon. I live in California. I have 2 kids. I'm a musician. I like cooking, reading, learning languages, and doing martial arts. I'm American, and so on. Once I have my list, I start looking up how to say these things. Sometimes I'll watch videos on the topics I want to talk about, sometimes I'll refer to a course book, and sometimes I'll just use Google Translate. Once I've done this, I'll share my sentences somewhere. italki, a Facebook group, a language exchange partner, with my tutor to get corrections. Once I have the correct phrases, I'll practice using them. I may record a video of me reciting them, or I may even try them out in a conversation. Either way, it's all about preparing. What are the most common ways to make learning fun and efficient? One of the best ways to make learning fun and efficient is to do things in your language that you love. For example, I may play video games in my language. You figure out what the instructions are quickly because you can't progress in a game unless you know what you're being asked to do. I may also watch karate instruction videos on YouTube in another language. Again, I can both hear and see what I'm being asked to do, so it's a great way to learn while doing something that I enjoy. I may also read in a language. I personally use Link, that's an app, because it helps me start reading sooner in a language. Or I may watch a cooking tutorial on YouTube in another language because I love food. These are all things I would usually do in English, and that I enjoy doing. I just do them in my new language as soon as I'm able. If doing these things is too challenging for my level, I use Drops to learn vocabulary. It's fun and engaging. And I also aim to connect with other people. Connection is really rewarding, and doing it in a new language, even at the beginning level, makes learning a language all the more enjoyable. If you leave the Drops app for a while, will you remember all the things it teaches you? This depends on how well you know that material. If it's a word you've mastered, you're likely to continue to remember it if you're using it in other contexts. If you're not using those words, you'll forget them over time. That's why we use an SRS-based algorithm in our dojo. It shows you the words you learn with us when it's time to review them so that you don't forget. How can I immerse myself in a language when I don't know anyone who speaks it? There are many ways you can immerse yourself in a language without conversing with other people. You can listen to music in the language. You can watch TV shows and movies, play games, switch your devices and accounts to the language, and listen to podcasts. Conversing with other people is still possible. There are loads of exchange platforms you can join: Tandem, My Language Exchange, italki, etc., where you can meet native speakers and arrange times to chat with them online. How do you reactivate a language you haven't used for a while? By diving right in. I may pull up an old familiar resource, go through it quickly to get back up to speed. I'll find a tutor or exchange partner to practice once I've done a bit of that catching up. And I'll also go through the Drops topics I've previously learned and spend time in the dojo to refresh on the words that I learned in the past. If you want to see me do this, I actually documented a 3-day refresh I did for Italian, and we will share the link with you for that. What is the best way to learn to speak at a conversational level? By putting yourself out there and having conversations even before you feel you're ready. The best way to learn how to converse is by conversing. I start by learning a few key phrases. Can you say that again? What is X in English or language? Can you write that down? What does that mean in English? This helps me get through much more in a language than I'd be able to do otherwise. I also pick topics I'd like to talk about and practice them with my exchange partners and tutors. I write scripts in the languages about those topics, practice them, and build on them by trying to have conversations on similar topics to my scripts. Can it help when you read a book in your target language? Definitely, but make sure you read books that interest you. Reading things that are boring or uninteresting to you won't benefit you. You'll find that you're bored, not engaged, or even dreading doing the reading. If you plan to read in a language, read things you'd read in your native language. Articles on topics you'd enjoy, books in the genres that you love, comics, whatever it is you normally enjoy reading. What is the best way to get motivated for Russian? How do I stay motivated to learn a language? Motivation is a big struggle for language learners. Whether it comes to getting motivated or staying motivated, there's one important step I recommend taking. Figure out your why. Need to kick things off? Why do you want to learn the language? Struggling to keep things going? Why is continuing important to you? Fall off the wagon and need to pick things back up? Why do you need to get back to it? If you know why you want to learn the language, it's easier to start, continue, and pick back up when your motivation flags. Beyond that, my advice is not to rely on motivation. If you rely on motivation, you're missing out on building discipline and routine. Studying only when you feel motivated to do it means you're less likely to study, and you'll miss out on the breakthroughs that happen and lead to motivation through daily practice. I like to think of motivation as a reward, rather than thinking of it as a trigger or something that gets me going. Does a polyglot only speak or also read and write in other languages? It depends on the polyglot. I think that many, if not most, are also able to read and write. To advance in a language, these are skills that you eventually need. Learning 2 languages at the same time. Yes, no, maybe. I've answered this question in the past in other Ask the Polyglot videos, and my answer is still the same. I don't recommend learning more than 1 language at a time. Maintenance, where you're working on not losing what you've learned or on small improvements in multiple languages, is okay. Starting several new languages or trying to tackle multiple new-ish languages at once is a lot more challenging. Some polyglots do learn more than 1 language at a time, but it can slow down your progress and cause language interference, which is when you mix up languages. So instead, I recommend focusing on one and then another. But of course, this is your language learning journey, so do what you feel is the right thing for you to do. How many languages do you know now? I am currently working on my 14th language. My native language is English. I've studied French, Italian, German, Spanish, Croatian, Mandarin, Chinese, Russian, Korean, Japanese, Hungarian, Hindi, Hebrew, Persian, and then of course English. And of course, I've just started my Persian language learning progress, so you can follow along by the link that we're going to share with you. How long does it take to master a language? It depends on the language, but I recommend looking at how long it takes in hours rather than in months or years. I commonly refer to the Defense Institute guidelines, and Group 1 languages take around 600 hours. Group 4 languages take more than 2,000 hours, and that's classroom time. That doesn't count homework time or individual study time. But in essence, the more hours you do in a shorter period, the faster you'll learn a language. But it's also about how you spend your time. If you aren't using the right methods or resources, it can take a lot longer. So that's it for this episode of Ask the Polyglot. I hope you found my answers to your questions helpful. And of course, follow us on Instagram to keep an eye out for the next time we're taking new questions. And I hope I get to answer your question in the next round. Until then, happy learning.